Okay, I'm here with Louisa. Thank you for coming through.
No, thank you for having me.
Let's get right into it because I've consumed a decent amount of your content in the past few days getting ready for this. What would you say is the easiest lever to pull or something that you noticed a lot of people just aren't doing as far as, let's say like general health first, and then after that would be like people who want to perform better. So people who want to get stronger, faster, more athletic, whatever that is. But I think just in general health, like what are you consistently telling people that's just like, why, like this is the lowest hanging fruit?
Yeah, the lowest hanging fruit, everybody wants to be quote unquote healthy. I think we are missing the point of what the true definition is when we think about health. Does that mean that you want to live until you're 120? Does that mean you just want to live a healthy life? You want to wake up and feel amazing? We really have to understand, because everybody has a different definition, right? But more often than not, what we're seeing is that people are grabbing onto this notion of health and thinking that they can just make a turnaround within 24 hours. And what I'm constantly telling people is, unless at the bottom of the pyramid, let's just say we've got this health pyramid, at the bottom of the pyramid is the free gifts from Mother Nature. And they're the three domains that I work in, speak in, consult in, optimize in. It is sleep, nutrition, and exercise. Unless you've got those three dialed in, for you, Zach, you would be on a completely different level to me. We're different ages, we're different heights, we've got different makeups. I'm a female, you're a male, so everything would be very, very different. But as long as we are optimizing in those three domains, we don't really need to do too much outside of that unless we want to be performing at a peak level. And that's when you take into consideration like ultra marathoners, triathlons, etc.
So to be a little bit of a devil's advocate, sometimes nutrition to what the average person faces is actually a pretty daunting task, it seems. Have you heard the like this ongoing debate from calories in versus calories out people, and then also people who are more of the line of like food is poison, so just don't eat poisonous food and you'll be all right. Don't worry about calories, don't worry about any of that. Have you heard any bit of this debate?
Yeah, this reductionist or this absolutism or absolutist statements that I call them are just really ridiculous. Right now there's a huge nutrition war on Instagram, and it's all centered around seed oils are bad and this one molecule is bad, and it really needs to stop. It's an absolutist. There's this video right now going viral of this chiropractor speaking about women who fast are not healthy. And that's it. That's all he said. And that's what I mean by absolutist statement. That means that he's not taking into consideration science. So I think to myself, we don't need to be talking about these, this is toxic, this is not. Mm-hmm. It basically really is. I do believe in, calories in, calories out to an extent. Okay, if we're talking about fat loss, for example, I'm not a nutritionist. I don't really go into nutrition with my clients because I have a nutritionist on board at Neuro Athletics, but I do know that is the number one pillar that you need to dial in.
Yeah, and it seems like it gets very clouded. I think also the way, if you ever watch someone scroll through TikTok or scroll through Instagram even, it's like 3 seconds is all you have. Mm-hmm. So the first thing you say has to be like, fasting is not healthy.
Yeah.
And then you explain it or whatever. That's just how the world is. And it's not good. I'm not saying this is good. It's just that's where you get the people who are like making these declarative statements, these absolute statements, when in reality, if you sat down and have a conversation with them, they're pretty well balanced probably. Yeah. It just doesn't sell. It just doesn't push the needle at all anywhere in their social media lives, which sucks.
And this is where I think the problem is right now when it comes to nutrition and disease states. Okay, so if we look at it at a macro level, we think to ourselves, why are people, the mortality rate, okay, if we think of people dying and getting neurodegenerative diseases or cardiovascular disease, if we look at it from a processed food perspective, if you see it from a public health policy, those are the things. If we look at processed foods, it's the McDonald's ads, it's the Coca-Cola ads. They're these massive conglomerates, these companies are endorsing celebrities to go through and sell, these processed foods, which then get targeted at kids and people who are on TikTok, who maybe don't have the education in the field of nutrition, and then they see that 3 seconds, or they see that, who's that rapper? That's, I think he's with Kylie Jenner. He's the one that went with, he did a campaign with McDonald's, and then McDonald's
Travis Scott.
Yeah, and then McDonald's just skyrocketed. Mm-hmm. And the reason I bring that up is because you mentioned that people are on TikTok, and that's great, but TikTok isn't a university degree.
Right.
It's targeted at the academic level of a 10-year-old.
Yeah, that's that's funny. My friend, so I talked about the calories in CICO group, and then food is poison group. He's in the food is poison side. And I also have
mean? What is
so it's like
food is poison?
That's just my way of saying it. I guess it's probably not. Is that don't eat poisonous food and you'll be fine, no matter what that is. And
what is poisonous?
So he has a list of 100 foods.
Okay.
Over 100 foods. And he goes, eat these as much as you want. And he's like, he has clients, he has hundreds of clients, and they all lose weight and they all live healthier lives. And his thing is like the calories in versus calories out crowd has adapted to how society is, rather than saying, hey, society, you should be less f***ed. And then the other crowd is like, hey, society, you should be less f***ed. The problem is like to try and explain almost where you were going, where these neurodegenerative diseases, all these diseases can occur from processed foods. And to describe the nuance of that is, I don't want to say difficult, because if you take some time, it takes time. But it's much faster to be like, hey, here's a set amount of calories you should eat.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
And make sure you get enough protein. That's it. Like, that's easier. And if you are a nutritionist, or if you are helping someone lose weight, it's much easier to give them that. And if you see results with people doing that, when someone says, hey, you shouldn't drink Diet Coke, the person who does calories in versus calories out is like, man, as long as you hit your macros and whatever, you can have a Diet Coke, you can do these things. And so there's this big butting of heads, and I've noticed it a lot, actually. And then I guess you were kind of diving into that. Like, I like how it's not whether you subscribe to calories in versus calories out or otherwise. It's kind of like, yeah, calories in versus calories out works, but it's also important to know that these foods are causing us a lot of issues. Mm. And you already kind of have this balanced opinion on the two, but it's just something that I've seen, and it's bothered me so much, right? Because you have the 3 pillars, right? And nutrition is just one that people just get stuck on.
People get so stuck on nutrition, and I don't know why. And I never really go out and talk about it, because I just get the vegans coming after me, and I don't know why. I don't want to bash on them either.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not a vegan. I have no problem with it, but for some reason they are the ones that are most prolifically advocating very loudly on social media, and I don't really like that. It's like each to their own. This is what the data says, this is what the science says, and we should go from that. Mm-hmm. But it's just, calories in, calories out, yes, to an extent. It just depends on what you want, because that means that I can go and eat a donut, and that's it.
Did you see the guy who lost weight eating McDonald's?
No.
There was a guy who, he took like 12 weeks, did calories in versus calories out, just ate McDonald's the whole time, lost like 10 pounds.
Great. Well, I wonder what his lipid profile is.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's...
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's where we need to also, talk about it. So when I talk about neurodegenerative diseases, that's my space. That's,
Mm-hmm.
I also want to point out, you mentioned before, you have to reduce what you're saying, because it's very hard on social media, as you said, in 15 seconds. How do you think I feel, Zach? I went to school for 15 years, and now I'm trying to say something on TikTok for 15 seconds. And people are like, what is this chick saying? It's hard. It's very hard to really understand the scope of dementia and Alzheimer's disease, something I speak of so much. It is a disease that is affecting 50 million people worldwide. That number is said to triple by the year 2050. If we don't knuckle down and understand this, that number is just going to quadruple. So we need to understand it, but you can't do that in a 15-second TikTok.
So I want to get back to that because do want to get into the neurodegenerative diseases, Alzheimer's, etc. But this is where I was getting at with my friend who he's kind of on the don't eat poisonous food side. He will do some sort of blog post, or he will do like a cookbook or ideas and things that people could practice. And then he puts it in a chat GPT and says, write this at a 3rd grade level. So he'll have his thing written out. And he said, rewrite this in a 3rd grade level.
Yeah.
And then that's how he posts it. So it's something I honestly, write that down. You should probably take that.
All right.
Yeah.
It's sad.
Well, yeah, but it's the way it is. Like it's sad. And again, it's really weird. We come to these places where we can either adapt to how things are and try and maneuver our way with this rule set. So McDonald's exists, Coca-Cola exists, like they're not going anywhere. So let's manipulate people into doing healthier things with these given bounds, or we can try and break down those walls. It's like you can fight the good fight and not do 15-second videos and not dumb your content down to the average 3rd grade reading, mental abilities, but how successful will you be?
Yeah.
I think there are spaces for both. Like, thank God we have a podcast right here. We're going to be speaking for over an hour. This is not a 15-second clip, so we get that opportunity. But it is pretty brutal. Yeah,
but we are living in a world, ladies and gentlemen, everybody listening or watching wherever you are, we are living in a world where we do have free education. My God.
Yeah.
I can't believe I'm at the age where I have to say I used to look at encyclopedias when I was in primary school.
So did I, yeah.
My parents got us a full set of encyclopedias. I thought, yes, and I would photocopy them and cut pieces out, and that was my project. But now we have free education. Who are you following?
Mm-hmm.
So that's another thing. Are you following people that are just out there to mass produce content to sell products? So that's where it gets a bit scary. However, I do believe, I started my career as a high school teacher. That's really how I started. So I really believe in the education, the power of education, literally pedagogy, which is the art and science of teaching. Like, how can you teach somebody? How can they learn? I believe everyone has the ability to learn. And if you don't understand something, it's not your fault. It's the person telling you.
Mm-hmm. Let's get into the neurodegenerative disease stuff. There's a couple things you said, like some of these are heritable diseases, but actually the percentage of them that are heritable is very low.
Yeah.
Or the chances that you get it due to your genetics are very low. So what does that mean? What does that say to our practices that cause us to get these disorders or diseases?
Well, let's do some defining first. So dementia is the umbrella term that we use for things, these neurodegenerative diseases, such as Alzheimer's disease. We've got Lewy body dementia. We've got many different types, that fall under the umbrella. Alzheimer's is the most predominant one that people are suffering with. I mentioned earlier the statistics, 50 million people worldwide. Now, it turns out, so there is around 30 genes involved in Alzheimer's disease. And it turns out that only around 7% of the people who are diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease have the genes responsible. So, and I just for all, argument's sake, let's just say 90%. 10% are getting it from genetics, 90% are getting it from where? So if you don't have the genes responsible for Alzheimer's disease, how are you getting Alzheimer's disease? And it turns out that it comes from many different factors. Lifestyle factors, comes from environmental factors, nutritional interventions, the way you exercise, the way you sleep, many different things. Stress, especially stress. These things contribute to an aging brain. And they happen in your 30s. They happen in your 40s, but we don't get the symptoms until we're in our 60s.
Mm-hmm.
So that means that we're all walking around out here doing God knows what, walking ourselves right into these neurodegenerative diseases. And then guess what happens? It is my true belief that this disease is going to be the collapse of the healthcare system, because it takes a lot of money per person per year. It's around $20,000 to $40,000 per person with Alzheimer's disease once they get it. And then when they do get it, who can afford that? Well, I mean, in the US, I'm talking the US right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's a debilitating disease.
Do you know which cultures have the lowest amount of neurodegenerative diseases offhand, or do you know, could you theorize?
No, but here's something interesting, okay? So one of the genes that's involved in this disease is the ApoE4 gene. So if you get the allele, you get one allele from mum, one from dad. If you get one copy of the gene, you have don't quote me on this, I think you have around a seven-fold, 7 times more risk of developing the disease. If you have 2 copies, you've got around a 12 times more risk of developing the genes. Now, there was a study done in Africa, and I forget where exactly, where there was many people walking around with 2 copies of this gene, meaning that they would more than likely get Alzheimer's disease, but they never do. Because why? Because
Lifestyle.
They're walking more, they're getting sunlight, they're less stressed, their food system isn't corrupt like it is here. They've got access to food, like whole foods, natural products. So we do know now that even if you do have 2 copies, it's not your destiny.
Mm-hmm.
Chris Hemsworth has 2 copies, and he's doing everything he can to not get.
Yeah, that was the recent announcement, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That is very interesting. So I always think, like, I love to audit my life, and there are some practices that I have that are probably not ideal, but I can also, because of my lifestyle, I can manipulate the rest of my day where other people can't. So if I stay up really late the night before, I can sleep in to whenever I want because I work for myself. I do what I want. And I wonder if it's kind of like giving myself this breathing space, this push and pull. I could probably, like, for instance, like just scrolling through social media, TikTok, Instagram, late at night. Now, it's not ideal right before you go to sleep. We've known that. How many times have you said it? How many times have Huberman said it? Everyone says, like, do not look at screens at a certain time. But then if I feel like I can just sleep in then. I can sleep a little bit longer. I can give myself this thing. The problem is for somebody who has to wake up at the same time every day, and yet they still have that dopamine, like they want that dopamine release from social media. They get home after they work out or whatever, and they scroll, and next thing they know, it's 1 a.m. They got to wake up at 8. That's not ideal at all for that person. So I always think, like, yeah, I'm allowed to do certain things as long as I dial in other parts of my day. Other people don't have that opportunity. They're at work all day long, or they're worried about bills or their kids or whatever that may be. So what sort of practices, in general, do you think can minimize stress? I think it's like, and I love that term stress because it seems over like an umbrella, because it can be onset from social media, which people don't understand. Like, I think scrolling can cause stress.
Yeah.
It's just a different kind of stress.
Absolutely.
It's not like a gritting your hands type of stress. That's kind
like
of
an exercise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like everyone thinks that stress is just like, I'm stressed out.
Yeah.
When in reality, you could be literally laying on your back, stressed out.
Yeah.
Or like this, but you don't really know.
Yeah. Acute stress isn't bad. We get this when we go to the gym. We need it, okay? Mm-hmm. Our body, we've got something called homeostasis, which is our internal regulation, okay? If you imagine at all times, our nervous system is like a seesaw, okay? So our nervous system is made up of the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. The central nervous system is the brain and the spinal cord. Then the peripheral nervous system is all of the nerves that come off of the spinal cord, then go into the different organs and muscles of the body. At any given time, we are always trying to maintain a balance. If you imagine a seesaw, we're either going into this sympathetic state, okay, which is it's a branch off the parasympathetic and autonomic nervous system. We've got sympathetic state and parasympathetic state, okay? Sympathetic state is that stress response, fight or flight. Parasympathetic is that rest and digest. So if we are acutely stressed from the gym, that's great, okay? We need that, okay? But we're just going to come back down to baseline.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if we are, and then you can imagine if we're in very much overdrive in the parasympathetic side, that means we're asleep because we're in a coma, okay? So we're always trying to come back up. Now, immediate stress isn't bad. It's chronic stress that is the problem.
And chronic is actually a medical term. Like, it's not just like, a lot of times it's like there's a certain amount that we would consider chronic, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you can measure stress by doing, different types of blood tests, looking at cortisol levels, okay, which is our stress hormone. Now, the chronic stress is where things start to, we get chronic inflammation, for example. And this is where things start to, go a bit where we don't want it to go. It can it can have an effect on how we sleep, how our mind works. It can go through and deteriorate some of the little arteries and capillaries in our brain. We don't want this. And it turns out that if we're going to the gym and we're getting that stress, but then we're on social media, we're getting that stress. Then we're fighting with our spouse, we're getting that stress. Then we're staying up late because new mothers, okay, are very sleep deprived. So then that adds to the stress. And just remember, your brain cannot really differentiate between different stresses. If you're being hit by a car, or if you're going through a divorce, how you take those stresses, your brain just thinks, okay, I'm stressed. Let's just release cortisol. Let's just keep releasing it. If you just keep releasing it, you don't bring yourself back down to baseline, you will in turn be in that chronic state.
Does supplementation add to sympathetic stress? So
sympathetic activation?
Yes. So would caffeine, nicotine, alcohol?
Yeah.
So just certain exogenous things. So I can imagine if you take caffeine, it just doesn't allow you to operate parasympathetically. So you recover, right? Well,
that's the idea of caffeine. It's an adenosine blocker. Yeah. So the way I like to think about these sorts of things and substances is it's not the immediate effect. So for example, alcohol may not make you stressed. It's, a depressant. It may make you low key, it may make you feel good. But then what does it do? Well, if you have it close to bedtime, it blocks REM sleep. So you actually sedate yourself. You don't go into sleep. You sedate yourself. That's what it is, low key. It's a sedative. And so you'll sedate yourself. Therefore, you'll wake up and you won't feel refreshed because you didn't sleep. You just knocked yourself out for the night. So then that lack of sleep aids to the stress response.
It's a lot of upstream, downstream with use too. Like you wake up, you feel tired, you have some coffee.
Yeah.
You need like a little kick, you have some nicotine. I do want to talk about nicotine. Do you know much about it, or have you looked into it too much?
No, that's going to be the next field along with the THC.
Right. I think caffeine is obviously just such a great drug for performance, I think. And obviously I say that meaning and it makes it sound cool and stuff because ideally it would not negatively affect anything else. And I believe that there is a way to consume caffeine in that way responsibly, especially for athletic performance. But it's tough. It's like, think about the way that it's marketed. Think about the way that people consume it throughout the day, throughout the week.
But it's not bad.
No, but it's like, it's almost the way that it's marketed is like, this is a lifestyle. This is what you should do. It's okay to have another, I mentioned this on Chris's podcast. I think I'm his most common guest, but we're also roommates, so it's interesting. Yeah. And I went on a caffeine rant because I was like, why is it that we demonize nicotine if you have nicotine in its purest form, the way that you consume it, if you were to consume it in like a non-toxic form, Yet we would still demonize it, have this stigma towards it. But the way that we consume caffeine in this country is crazy. I talked to this woman. She's 125 pounds, right around 30 years old, 5'5", and she had a venti cold brew in her hand, and it was in the morning. And I looked up how many milligrams of caffeine that is. It's 310 milligrams of caffeine. Now, for athletic performance, you can have anywhere from, I looked this up, it was like 3 milligrams per kilogram up to 9 milligrams per kilogram. And that's actually beneficial to a lot of different things in athletic performance. And mind you, this is just like a very narrow field of study. But this woman is working a marketing job. And it's, first thing in the morning, and maybe she didn't eat that much. And she's like, I'll probably have like another coffee later in the day. So that's 400 milligrams per day for a 125-pound woman, 55-kilo woman. She's having like a medical dose of caffeine daily. And that's how it's marketed. That's how it's pushed on people. And I'm very interested in seeing how other things now that we're getting exposed to can be marketed and can be pushed towards people as well.
It's exactly what I said. I actually put out a newsletter, and it went out at our Wednesday one goes out at 8 p.m. on Wednesdays, and it was about the way that processed foods are marketed. And I always think to myself, is it education? Like, for example, I know that in schools, this is very different to Australia. I don't know whether it's state schools here, but you guys provide lunch for...
Yes. So it's public. We call them public schools, but that's state funded.
Okay. Yep. So and I've seen what the kids get given. It's like a fruit cup, for example, or I don't know if they get a fruit cup, but they get everything that is just terrible for them. And then they go home and they're also eating terrible foods. And then before they go to school, they're eating a breakfast that's probably just on the go, which is, for some reason in this country, people like to have donuts and say that that's breakfast.
It's wild. Well, I think we're coming around to the fact that is just a dessert. Like, it's a joke.
Even a bagel. That's just like a loaf of bread just squished into one donut size.
Yeah, and... Yeah, go ahead. I don't want to interrupt.
So basically what I'm trying to say is, yes, marketing is going to be there. There's marketing for everything. Everything is there. It's, do you have the power and the education to know whether to buy it or to consume it or not?
And that's the thing is, like, we don't. We've shown that year in, year out. Generationally, we don't. And so that's where, like, the guys like Lane Norton and my really good friend James Smith. Do you know James? He's the one who lives in Australia, who I was talking about. He moved from the UK to Australia. He's never coming back.
He's a very smart man then.
Yeah. He's literally never coming back. I like, every time I talk to him, he's like, mate, it's great here.
It's great here.
Yeah, in his London accent. But both them are the most prevalent voices, to my knowledge, on this calories in, calories out. There's also Greg Doucette. There's a bunch of people who, they're like, their idea, at least to my knowledge, is like, if we gained control and scope over what we consume in a day via calories and trying to have a higher protein diet, we can then expand into further places. We take a small step and go from there. And this is kind of like, gets to that marketing thing, is like, it's hard to fight the good fight, and we've proven time and time again that we can't, that we don't have the wherewithal to eat the right thing. So let me give you some hacks. Calories in versus calories out, high protein diet. Those are going to give you the wherewithal for it. Which isn't very pure. It's not very good. It's like a defeatist approach, but it works, and it has worked. Each one of them has thousands of clients that they've worked with where they've lost weight. So they've lost weight and they've gotten healthier. So it's a very interesting thing. It's like, it's very frustrating.
Yeah.
Look,
I equate this, I bring this up in every podcast, with talking to my parents. I regularly argue with them about health, and I'm got full control now. I do all their blood work, biomarkers. I've done DNA tests on them. I've got them all their specialist appointments. I've also gotten them a personal trainer, so now they're getting trained at the gym. So we're doing everything we can to, slow down the aging process. And they're in their late 60s. And but they have no idea what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. My mother will send me a message. Oh, should I buy this herb? Because I saw it. It was on the TV, and then she'd type it into YouTube, you know. She doesn't understand what this is. And so I can only imagine and it's daunting. It is daunting. It was daunting for me to learn this. It took me 15 years of going to Sydney, studying physiology, medicine, neurology. I had to study so much to understand it. So I get it. It's hard. And then you've got someone who is not in that field and who just is like, just tell me what to do. Unfortunately, it's not that easy. However, if you start with the basics, like I said, sleep, exercise, nutrition, just do them regularly. Sleep consistently, regularly, if that makes sense.
Right.
And by sleep consistently, I mean have quality sleep consistently. You mentioned earlier it's okay for you to be up until 1. I disagree.
Yeah, by the way, I seem to give myself like a little leeway there. I know I didn't quite mean it like that, actually. Yeah. I know that the practices aren't ideal. But I at least, like, for me, I give myself less stress. Like, I don't have to report to work to a boss and be like, and you know what I mean? Like, I at least get to give and push and pull. And I know where I'm, you know, it's like this feedback thing. I know, like, scientifically, obviously, staying up till 1 and messing with circadian rhythm is not ideal.
Yeah.
So.
And you don't get the best start in your day. You can block certain areas of your brain from releasing dopamine, which we need the following day. You mess up your circadian rhythm. But yeah, it's so, sleep quality is harder as we age because that's just due to the natural brain aging process. For me, you have to also choose where you have to know yourself. Everyone gets their poison from somewhere, I say. I don't drink. I don't, never smoked a cigarette. That whole, if I'm emotionally stressed, okay, and people sometimes turn to alcohol, and that doesn't make me feel good in any way, but I could eat a block of chocolate. Like if I'm, I remember when I went through my first breakup, I wasn't turning to alcohol and drugs. I was turning to food, and it's like, okay, well, I know that if I go through something really emotional, I will turn to that. You have to know your triggers. We're all individuals. I'm a woman. I know, I menstruate every month. I know sometimes I get sometimes I get extremely hungry. That's just what women go through. So I understand that. You've got to know who you are, what you can handle, and then optimize from there.
I always say with these tough concepts, as long as you're active in the way that you approach them, you're considerate of them at least, you're better than 99% of the people out there. Or maybe not better than other people, but you're doing a good job. Like if you're considerate about all of these different things, it usually means you're trying to educate yourself from, maybe there's two sides of the argument. You're educating yourself from here and you're educating yourself from there. And it's interesting if you consider the binary of all of these things and you find yourself in the middle kind of going back and forth, that's the best you can do. That's how I feel. But it's the same way I dumb it down to in my sport of Olympic weightlifting. So there's a movement called the jerk. You go from the shoulders to overhead. And some people struggle with the split, which is a style of jerk. And then some people do what's called a power jerk, where their feet just kind of, you jump and you catch and your feet don't split. And I always think, like, as long as you're experimenting with both and you struggle with one, you struggle with the other, but you experiment, you're getting work done. You're still working out. You're still training.
Yeah.
So it's for people who are like, man, I try this and I try that and it doesn't work and I don't know what to do here and here. As long as you're not just giving up, as long as you're not like, man, screw this. I get told I should eat meat. I shouldn't eat meat. I should be vegan. I should not be vegan. Like, as long as you're just kind of like going like this, I feel like you should hang your hat on that. That's just personally my mantra.
Yeah. And so let's talk about exercise, because what you're referring to is just do it, really, without quoting Nike.
Nike. Wait, but don't you guys call it Nike?
Yeah.
but you've changed.
I had to change, I've had to change skeletal because we say skeletal muscle in Australia, and I said it on Instagram and I got bashed. They're like, you don't even know how to say it properly. I'm like, oh, hey, I'm from Australia. That's how we say it.
Oh, my roommate, he's adapted a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I've had to.
Yeah. So but he called it a router. He calls it a router.
Okay.
Right. But he's changed a lot of pronunciations just so he doesn't get the thing. But yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I talk about capillaries and you guys say capillaries. So I'm changing that too. But let's talk about exercise because that was my biggest thing with my mother and my father. I'm like, just move. Now, exercise, we know, has enormous benefits to the way that we age. And that's what we're talking about here. How can we ward off these diseases whether it's cardiovascular disease or neurodegenerative disease? We know that exercise is a key pillar in that. Why? Well, we know that we get a robust release of these wonderful hormones called myokines. When we're resistance training, we're getting a release of over 600 types of myokines. They get released from the skeletal muscle. They go into the bloodstream. They come up. They go through the blood-brain barrier, and they have effects on different areas of our brain. We have one called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. This is a growth factor for the brain, meaning that it can go into the hippocampus, which is this little seahorse-shaped structure deep within the temporal lobes. It's the first thing to go as we age and get these neurodegenerative
Is it
states.
hippocampus?
Hippocampus, yep. Looks like a little seahorse. This is where a lot of our memory formation and consolidation happens. We have these little neurons inside there, obviously. Neuron is a brain cell, and they die off. Through exercise alone, whether it's aerobic or whether it's resistance training, we can grow new neurons in the hippocampus due to training, due to these myokines. So we can get so much benefit from exercise. We can get something called cardiac remodeling. Okay, our cardiovascular system is very vast, but it needs to be strong as we age. So what does that mean? Well, arteries and the chambers of our heart contain muscle. What does that mean? Well, if we train it, it means that it can become more adaptable to stress. So if we train the aorta, for example, obviously when it pumps the blood, the more stronger it gets, it means it can pump more blood per beat. What does more blood mean? It means that we are getting more blood to our muscles and to our brain, which means we're getting more oxygen and nutrients with one pump. That's amazing.
Less work.
More efficiency,
yeah.
Less economy. We need that as we're getting older because it turns out that things just don't work as well when you're in your 80s.
More efficiency, less economy is the same thing with sympathetic and parasympathetic use as well, right? Like if you don't relax, you're working more. Your brain is working more. You're just working more. And that is just like, it is weird to think that we have a finite amount of work before we die. And if we use it all up when we're in our 30s, then we get these issues later on, like dementia. Jesus, that's stark, but
it's very scary. It's a scary disease. But my job, I work with the world's best athletes. Okay, predominantly in 3 sports: Major League Baseball, NBA, and tennis. And I'm working really hard. Everybody has a team. Okay, every athlete has a team. So I will consult with their trainer, with their strength. We're a team, and we've got one focus, and it is how can we maximize this athlete's time? So everybody has a finite time. We've got we've got 24 hours in a day, but as we get older and you've got a wife or a husband and you've got kids, you've only got so much time to be in the gym. You've only got so much time to sleep, and you've only got so many hours to prepare food. So you want to make sure that this is back to the economy versus efficiency. You want to make sure that all of these buckets are getting maximized to their potential. So you've got to be making sure that you're going to the gym, you're doing what you have to do, then you're leaving. Because if you just overspend time there, you start to hate it, and then you go less. So you need to be doing that. You need to be maximizing the nutrients that you're getting throughout the day. You need to be maximizing sleep quality and efficiency.
Were you ever shocked by by some of these athletes' practices, whether good or bad?
Yes.
Let's go with good first.
Okay.
Like, you'd be like, wow, you get that much sleep? Wow, you eat like that?
Yeah. So the good when it comes to sleep, the good with these athletes is because they're at this level, they all of them will say to me, I'll do whatever it takes, which is unbelievable. That to me, that means they're coachable. As if I'm going to coach them, they need to be coachable. So that's the starting point. The second thing is they are not afraid to do the monotonous work. If I just say, hey, just bounce the ball for 20 minutes a day, they will bounce a ball for 20 minutes a day. I don't tell them to do that, but what I'm trying to say is they're not afraid to do the monotonous work. So they're really good at adherence. They just need the protocols. A lot of them do sleep. I don't find real, at this level, athletes who are saying, I don't want to sleep. They know that during sleep, that's when they're going to get the most of their recovery. They already know that. It's more so fine-tuning because I work at that elite level where just a 1% margin can mean the difference between first and third. So I'm more coming in and fine-tuning those little details. So they're doing that really well. The things that they're not doing well is, we were talking offline. I put a tweet out which went viral. And that tweet yesterday was, I don't know who needs to hear this, but marijuana is not helping you sleep. Something that a lot of my NBA players are not doing well is they're having marijuana because they believe it's helping them sleep. Yeah. It's not. So that's something they're not doing well.
Yeah. So that would be where you would say is the bad is THC.
Yeah. If they are, it's THC.
God, it is. There's a push and pull with everything. And it's very weird. You could also, a lot of athletes, a lot of people in general, you think about another vice and it's sex. And the consequences from having alcohol as a vice, the consequences from having cigarettes as a vice are pretty dire and they're in your face, right? The consequences from not really being able to manage your sexual relations with people is not as... it's not physiological as much as what it does to affect the world around you and even your own mental state. And that's something that I feel as though people might not consider as being like a bad vice. Same thing goes with like scrolling on Instagram and social media. There isn't really a in your face problem. So that might be one of a place that if I was to, suspect athletes of being in a position where they're not doing everything in the most ideal way, right? Because you think of vices like going out and drinking when you have training the next day, like you're going to suck. Okay. But scrolling on Instagram too long or, having like sexual relations with people that are like meaningless and whatever, those are less in your face, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's a touchy subject, but it's important, right?
Because I don't know what you mean by in your face. Are you talking like when you have...
So you're hungover. You get hungover, like really bad hangover from drinking alcohol. But you might feel a little groggy if you didn't sleep properly the night before. Those things stack up, but it's not like being hungover.
Yeah.
And again, if you're thinking of sex in this dopaminergic way, like it's just a dopamine release, it's just something that I can get and then go away, then you might have that same kind of push and pull, same kind of like opposing ends of the spectrum, like alcohol here, sex here. Sex isn't that, right? But I think those are the things that worry me the most is like things that you wouldn't suspect have these dire consequences.
Yeah. What's interesting to me is that people are still smoking. When I arrived at the studio where we're at today, there was two guys at the ticketing machine smoking, and it's really weird to me to see that people are still smoking. So that's my take on cigarettes I'm talking about. But yeah, look, I think you learn, it's like how many times are you going to make the same mistake if you are trying to perform at that peak, whatever that means to you. I call everybody an athlete, because even if you are a mother of 3, which is extremely difficult, and it is, and these people need to understand that you still need to perform at your peak, because imagine having 3 little kids at home. It's really hard. So you also have to perform at your peak. So I want everyone to understand that just because you're not training and you're not an athlete, but you are in your own way. There is an Olympic game within you.
I love that.
Yeah.
So Chris,
I just came up with that. Now.
Yeah,
it's
good.
Really, really good.
So Chris invited me to go to Bring Me the Horizon concert. They're a big, really famous rock band. They've done collaborations with Ed Sheeran and MGK. Like they're pretty pop culture, and he's friends with the guys. So we went, and we were heading to Houston to meet up with them, be backstage for the concert, and they were like, "Hey, we have a few hours to kill. Can you guys train with us?" I was like, "Hell yeah, that's what I do for a living."
Yeah.
So I brought my camera and I just filmed us training with them. And then I kind of interviewed them as we went. And I became fascinated with fitness as it pertains to performance in anything, literally anything. You could be a chess player, but your fitness matters. You know this, right?
Oh, well, your brain definitely matters.
Right. And okay, if fitness and exercise has benefits to the brain, like if you are not being fit, if you are not working out, like you're not going to be as good of a chess player. And so for these guys who tour and they play shows every night and they're just constantly like, there is a capacity for what they do. And whenever there's capacity, there's recoverability that needs to be worked on.
Yeah.
And so like I am fascinated by the fitness it takes to be a rock star. I'm fascinated by the fitness it takes to be a mother, So
oh yeah.
So that's something that I've been in contact with bands now. I send them that video. So I made this YouTube video of us training with them, and it did really, really well. It's got I think over 250,000 views. And I've sent it to other PR departments for bands, and I'm like, "Hey, let me come interview your guys and ask them about their practices," being able to go and do show by show by show by show. Because if you think about screaming and singing, like that's a muscle that you have to use. So it doesn't even have to be, for me, it doesn't have to be like, oh, well, I wake up at 7 a.m. and I get in the gym and I train because it makes me feel good. No, what specifically do you do to train the muscles in your throat? To what do you eat? What do you drink? How do you sleep so that it can recover? Things like that just fascinate me. So I love that you just brought that up.
Yeah, and I did that because I also work on Wall Street, meaning that I work with portfolio managers and investors, and I'm talking guys who are, they've got a portfolio, they're managing like $3 billion in assets. Their personal take home is like $30-40 million a year. I'm working with these guys because one wrong decision is they could lose maybe, I would say, $500 million in just one decision. So I train them the exact same way I would train my most elite athlete. And let me tell you, it matters. Because if you think about if they need to go into work every day, I equate their Olympic game to them going in on the day that they need to make a trade. And this trade is responsible. They've got, they're taking care of 50 people's families. People rely on them to make money for their family. So if he makes one wrong decision on that day because he didn't sleep well, we know that sleep extremely impacts the way that we make decisions via the prefrontal cortex. If he doesn't exercise, he's probably going to feel lethargic. He's going to hate himself because he's getting a little fat. He doesn't feel good. So his confidence is going to be down. Therefore, that affects decision making. If he doesn't eat the right foods, it's going to affect his judgment and the way he makes a decision. So these 3 pillars, once again, doesn't just matter if you're LeBron. If you are a mother of 3, I keep saying that because I just got back from Australia. My brother has 3 kids. He loves when I come home because I look after them. And it's like a marathon for me. And not to mention, one of them, the middle one, is at the age where she's just talking a lot about anything and watch me and do this and did you know this and I saw this on TikTok. It's a lot. So I think, oh my God, you've got to be really fit to do this. And then not to mention the school drop-offs and everything. But so everyone has their own Olympic game within them. How are you training for it? And that's going to mean the difference between you being happy and you being unhappy.
So we have exercise, nutrition, sleep. Anything else we're missing?
Yeah, Neuro Athletics. So my company, which was created back in 2014, which was literally, I wanted to live at the intersection of high performance and neurology. So I married the two in Neuro Athletics, and that was the birth of the company. But now we've got a complete discipline within the athletic space. So when we think of exercise and we think of, okay, you're working from the neck down. That's your physiology. You're working on your body, but are you working from the neck up? And Neuro Athletics training, which is the combination of hand-eye coordination, reaction time, memory, learning, all these types of things. If we can train those, which you can, with just little things, and you and I are going to do a YouTube clip on it to show all your community. If you can train those, you're going to have a really, really nice setup for having a high-performing brain. So you can be training things like your brain. You can be training reaction time. You can train hand-eye coordination. You can train memory. You can train information processing speed. You can train all these little things, little areas in your brain, so your brain can become thicker. The cortex of the brain, the gray matter of the brain.
Everyone wants a thicker brain.
Yeah, because a thicker brain means
could mean thicker biceps. Like, could it mean I'm?
No.
Sounds stupid. If I have a better acting brain, though, I can get more jacked.
Okay.
If that was my thing.
Yeah, if
right?
you did, because you know what, it would allow you to push harder and further at the gym with each rep.
There you go. The value is right there.
The value's there.
Do you know who Dr. Jordan Shallow is?
Yeah.
Okay. Have you spoken with him at all?
He's coming on my podcast on Monday.
Yeah, I was going to say,
I can't believe you said that. That's so funny.
He's one of my good friends. I just had him on my show.
Okay.
And you two, please be sure to talk about stability versus, I think it was like stability style of exercises versus just like, so the way that he described it was, the way that you can work neurologically on something rather than doing like a bicep curl or like pressing. He said it was much more valuable to maybe hold a kettlebell and walk and provide that stability because it's more reactionary. So what you're doing, your brain is reacting to the stimulus and stabilizing it rather than the other way around, coming from a stable position and you just moving it.
Yeah.
And he was like adamant about this. He was adamant about this. And what the coolest thing is like, okay, well, that's his thing now. So with athletes, it's like, we're always going to work on this reactionary path. And it's almost exactly what you're talking about. You two would definitely be, because he works at HOA in Miami, House of Athletes.
Okay.
And it's owned by a famous football player.
I've seen it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so he trains really high level athletes.
Yeah.
And he just continually, so I did a podcast with him and then I did a gym session with him. And he was just always saying, now our gym session was more about bro session, bodybuilding stuff. But he was always saying, like, working from this place where your mind, your brain has to work in order for you to work out.
That's what, I started public speaking around, I've had my podcast since 2016, but I started public speaking probably around a year and a half ago. Now, I'm an advisor to Tonal, and they had an inaugural big event this time last year. And I went there and I spoke, and that's actually what I said. I said, instead of going to the gym for your body, we should start to go to the gym for our brain. And I went on in that talk to then talk about, which it went viral on YouTube. I went and talked about the fact that your brain is actually responsible for everything that you do, from the kick that you do, the kick, I was talking about a soccer player, but like the way somebody kicks a ball, the way you catch a ball, the way you perform any movement isn't because your bicep is just getting shorter and contracting. It's because you have areas in your brain, in the primary motor cortex, which sends a neuron, which sends a message to a different area of the brain, which sends a message to the upper motor neurons to perform an action. We've got this top-down processing that happens with the brain. If it's the sensory system, if you feel like the ball, your sensory, if you're going to catch something, you've got the bottoms-up mechanism, okay, which you catch it in your brain, you send signals from your arm all the way up to your brain, which signals, I just caught a ball. Okay, so we're constantly transferring these messages, and we, athletic trainers, personal trainers, whatever, coaches don't understand that, which is actually, we've got a program now, the Neuro Athletics Coaching Certificate, which teaches trainers about the brain. Literally, it's like teaching first-year medical students neuroanatomy.
So you want to know the thing that provides the highest amount of power output and most weight moved with probably the highest amount of proprioception, proprioceptive ability you need to complete it. That is Olympic weightlifting. And that's my sport. That's what
Why is that?
The weight that the reason it's so demanding on your brain, and it's so technical, and yet it uses the absolute highest amount of weight possible. So it may not be as technical as shooting a basketball, but a basketball, I don't know how much a basketball weighs. So we're combining the technicality and power and force production at the absolute pinnacle. And that's why I love it so much. And what I love a lot is, like, I taught Aaron how to do some weightlifting stuff. And after it, he's like, man, that was amazing. Because he's like a seeker. You'll once you meet him, you'll see he's a seeker of everything. Like, he just wants to go and do all these different things. And when I was able to teach him some Olympic weightlifting, he was like, what this does while I'm lifting, it's such a relief because my brain is firing so hard. I'm not really worried about pushing hard. It's just, it has to happen because I'm just so focused on the technicality of everything. So that's why I'm incredibly interested in what you're talking about. And I hope you're interested in Olympic weightlifting, and I can maybe show you some stuff on how like crazy technical it is. So if you can imagine, like, so the greatest snatch of all time is by Lasha Talkhadze. He's a Georgian, and he snatched 225 kilos. And the snatch is from the floor to overhead in one movement, one fluid movement. So the idea is there's this contact that happens at the hips. The bar becomes free, and the lifter has to drop under this bar. So the bar comes up, and he's not just pulling the bar up, right? If he did that, he would not be able to lift that much weight. I mean, for the average human, it's a lot of weight, but for him, it's not that much because he has to, the amount of power output to get the bar from here to here is quite large, but the amount of power output to get the bar from here to here and then drop underneath it is less, so we can do more weight. And so you make contact, the bar is freed. Literally, it is no longer, you're no longer imposing any more force production. So there's a force production there's a rate of force production curve. Once it hits the hips and once you extend, it actually will go down. You still have force in your hands.
Yeah.
You drop underneath and you catch, and you have to stabilize in your shoulders, and then you stand up from there.
So what makes him, is it the weight that qualifies him to say that it was the best?
Yes.
Okay, so it's the weight.
Yes.
Okay.
225 kilos. But he's incredibly technically, like, he is it's a gorgeous lift.
Okay, we're going to have to see that. Is that what Layne Norton is doing?
No, so that's powerlifting.
Okay, so
different.
Okay.
Two different sports. So powerlifting is squat, bench, and deadlift. And powerlifting was actually originally an offshoot of Olympic weightlifting and then bodybuilding. So a lot of powerlifting were known as like odd lifts that were accessories to the movements that were performed in the Olympics. And there were a ton of movements that were performed in the Olympics at one time. There was a single arm snatch. Now there's only two, but there's a bunch of different things. And some guys were just like, I like these accessory movements. I can get really strong at these. And they created that sport out of it. Also, at the same time, bodybuilding, we use the squat, we use the bench, you use the deadlift, and now you can get really good at those. So we, in the 70s or maybe late 60s, we went from being very good at weightlifting in America to not good at all, because the shift was around, the golden era of, we had Arnold and strongman and powerlifting. It all shifted over here, and weightlifting was over here. That's kind of like a long overview of the history of weightlifting, but it is a fantastic sport to watch. You should, on Instagram, you should just follow a few accounts, and you'll get to see these men and women do these things that you just like, you cannot believe is possible. In slow motion with high definition cameras. It's beautiful looking. Okay. It is like, if you ever see someone throw a javelin or throw a baseball, it's like, what the hell is happening? Like, or you work with tennis players. My God, watching them hit a serve,
let me tell you,
a slow motion serve, like what they do with their body, it's ridiculous. The amount of force, and it's just crazy.
The reason, I'm excited that you brought up weightlifting being, as beautiful as it was, and you said I can imagine you'd get a lot of CNS fatigue from it. This is the exact same reason why I work with ball sports. As I work with NBA, baseball, and tennis. Baseball, out of every sport, baseball is the number one sport that requires the highest amount of visual acuity.
Oh, I don't doubt it at all. Yeah. That's
all it is. That's why I work with them.
Yeah.
That's why I work with tennis players. Basketball players, you don't really need it. The ball, the perimeter is much bigger, so you need more of other skills. But when you look at the highest recording visual acuity, we hear of 20/20 vision, then we hear of, but that's all we hear. But these players have 20/10. They have got and that's part of it. We look at that. We do visual acuity testing. We look at that, and when you can understand how fast this ball is going, and if a player can see, if he can detect that the ball is coming towards him, depending on the trajectory of the angle, okay, he can move his body to get there faster, even if that is 0.3 seconds faster. That's the margin I'm talking about. So I think to myself, it's the same thing. It's really beautiful to watch. It's like, how can we fasten the stimulus, the point at which he recognizes the stimulus, for that stimulus to go through the retina, through the optic nerve, down into the brain, back to the occipital cortex, which is where you process the information, to then register it back to the prefrontal cortex, where it says, okay, that's a ball, pick my hand up. That's what I'm doing. I'm saying, okay, he's at 0.5, I want him at 0.3, because if he gets 0.2 seconds faster, that means he gets there, boom, and throws it to the next player. And that is what gets you to the championships.
So you had mentioned sleep, and your reaction time is just horrifyingly bad if you have bad sleep. So I didn't really notice this at all until probably this year. I'm 32, and I've kind of, like, my whole life I've just been an athlete, like playing sports, and I don't think about anything else. Like, I never really thought about nutrition recovery, because I just try really hard and work really hard, and just being young, I kind of got away with it. Obviously I could have been better in so many different places, but I notice, like, I'll have a bad night's sleep, and I'll wake up and I'll have to rush to the gym, or I'll have to do these things, and I'll get in my car. And right when I get in my car, it's like the first time I have to think and react. The rest of the morning routine for me, like, I kind of just get through it, pack my bag, and I get in the car. And what I have to do in my car, sometimes I have to plug in my phone, and I'll have to call someone, or I'll have to put like a map thing in there, and I'll be like trying to drive at the same time, and I'll look up, and I'm like, oh my God, I can't even, like, I need to just put this away and just drive as hard as I can, because my brain right now is fucking pathetic.
Yeah.
And I've never had that
Sluggish.
happen before until like this year.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you something that's going to blow your mind. At the age of 30, our brain begins to atrophy. Obviously, you know what the word atrophy is, decrease in cell size. We start to lose neurons, and they start to deteriorate at the age of 30. Isn't that scary?
Yeah.
So it's no wonder that, you know, you're 32 now, so you're probably just experiencing, oh my God, if I don't have a good night's sleep. Like, do you remember being, you know, I was a triathlete. I remember I went out one night, I was 22, and I had a race the next day, and I knew it was a 12 p.m. race. So I thought, it's okay, I'm going to go out, you know, and I'm going to have a few drinks. I think I had like 4 drinks. And the next day, I came first. It was a podium finish, and I was like, you know, my coach was like, what did you do the night before? I'm like, oh, I don't want to tell you. If I did that now, in my 30s, I would probably die. So yeah, as you get older, things start to, you know, don't work as well. Now, road accidents, the number one cause of road accidents is reaction time due to sleep deprivation. So sleep deprivation, even what you're describing is that you didn't have the best sleep. You're kind of cloudy and gluggy the next day, and that's generally...
It's weird because it took until I get in my car to be like, holy
because that's when you know you have to wake up.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm like, come on, let's go. Like, and it just doesn't happen. It's so weird. I can like picture it right now in my brain. Like I know the road that I go down where I'm like, what the fuck, Zach? You are not this dumb.
Yeah. Do you ever drive places and you think, and your mind was elsewhere and you think, how did I get here? Yeah. Sometimes that happens to me and that scares me. Yeah. So thank God I don't drive.
But so I think about now baseball.
Yeah.
Where everything is reaction. Like, have you ever seen a GoPro footage of the catcher?
Yeah.
So you see the ball coming and you're like, what? Come on.
Yeah.
No one's going to hit that. And they fucking hit it.
Listen, I've seen...
It is the most insane sport.
I've seen the Dodgers, wink, wink, training. And I've seen, like, you know, you just do this. And you just watch you
can hear the ball too.
You can hear, you've got the speed, and they're just like, with all the analysis, you know, it's like, okay, go. It's just and you think, oh my God, it's scary. But that's what we're talking about. And if you look at baseball players, do they look? They don't really look. Some of them, I think, how can you run?
Well, because you can't see their brain. They have freak of nature brain.
Yeah.
They do. You have to. I mean, that's you were saying.
But they're big as well.
Yeah. So yeah, every sport has this act that is so viscerally, it's so incredibly violent and enticing, and kind of like gives you, when you see it in person and you don't do that sport.
Yeah.
I remember I worked with tennis at Texas A&M and just seeing them serve. That's all it was. I was at the receiving end of a serve, and I'm like, what the f*** was that? Baseball, just seeing a pitch come in. Hearing pads hit at the line in the NFL. There's these movements that are just so... I don't know what they... As a spectator, what they do to you is just so incredible. And to think of... You know, these people train, so the way they see these things is not as intense, but it still is intense. They just can't tell, you know? They've done it so many times, like they don't realize what they're doing is so insane. So maybe they might take their recovery for granted. They might take their sleep, nutrition for granted. And I think it's really cool what you're doing, to be like, hey, like, you guys got to understand what you're doing is f***ing insane, and you need everything.
Everything.
Yeah. Because
your brain chews up a lot of energy. Okay. It chews up, you know, 20 to 30% of the calories that you take is consumed by the brain. So it takes up a lot of energy. But the way I describe it is, if you work on your brain, okay, you've got more fuel to last you a longer period of time. Just like you've got more muscle fibers than me in my arm, probably everywhere in your body. But that means you can lift heavier because there's more there. Okay? It's the same for your brain. If you train it and you get it working well and it's functioning well, it can survive longer and it can survive stronger. So that's the angle I'm coming at. So if these athletes, and it's a lot of mental energy to go through a game. Have you ever sat, some games like these baseball games are going.
I think tennis is the most insane. I think tennis is probably the craziest endurance sport I've ever seen.
Did you see the Australian Open?
I saw that Djokovic won it.
Yeah, so Djokovic, I was really proud.
I love the Australian Open, by the way. I think
it's the best time of year in Australia. But Tsitsipas, which is, I'm Greek, so he was representing Greece, and I just loved seeing that. That was a really beautiful sport to watch. But last year, okay, the final of the 2022 Australian Open was between Medvedev.
Mm-hmm. The Russian, yep.
He's amazing. He's got a bit of anger problems, and Nadal. Oh my! It went for over 4 hours. If you saw Nadal, and is he in his late 30s?
Yes.
It was unbelievable. I think it's one of the best matches of all time, and just to see them was just so beautiful to watch. But you think, oh my God, their bodies, what they're going through. But I'm thinking their brain is in overdrive, and I equate it to, imagine you're sitting down and you're doing a test, okay? And it's a hard math test, and it's going to mean that if you don't pass this test, then your family doesn't eat for the next month. Imagine how, that would be really nerve-wracking. Imagine going through that test for 4.5 hours with the entire world watching you. It's really enduring. So the fact that tennis players can go through that is phenomenal.
I love everything in a tennis match is the antithesis of homeostasis of the human mind. Like, it is the opposite of what, like, these athletes have to train out, like, just like human physiology of their brains and do that's just like this test that's just so insane. Yeah. I say this, I'm like, what's the toughest sport? I always say tennis, because it's a 4-hour long sport with a direct opponent that you're going at, right? I think fighting, so like UFC, MMA fighting is probably like, it's you have an opponent that can impose their will directly on you. It's one-on-one. But this one goes for 4 hours. Sometimes it goes up to 7 hours. Sometimes it's like an entire
Depends
day.
on how good you are.
Yeah, and that is, and you're not allowed to look at a coach. You can't even look at your coach, or else you get penalized.
Yeah.
Your coach can't say anything. It's just you alone against one other person. The mental part of that, I just cannot grasp.
And you see people. That's where I come in. Yeah. You see, one of someone I really want to work with. So I'm putting it out there to the world. I lost my chance with Serena, because she, during her time, I just wasn't there. And so I lost my chance. She was my golden egg, but she's retired now. I want to work with Naomi Osaka because she's young, she's emotional, doesn't really, she's got great athletic prowess, great ability, but I'm seeing that, okay, other things are, she's looking out at the crowd and taking that into consideration, or she's just saying, I just don't feel like I want to just go on the court today. Like, she's doing things that are just not in line with what a professional athlete should be doing. So I'd love to take her on board. But these athletes, sometimes they succumb to the pressures of the crowd, and we see that. We see when they slam their rackets to the ground, which is an immediate violation. That's anger. We see them yelling at the ref. So yeah. Yeah. Umpire. Yeah. So yeah, this is Neuro Athletics.
Yeah. So what do you what's next for you? Seminars, I believe, is what you said you would like to do.
So yeah, we're launching our inaugural. So we have a Neuro Athletics coaching certificate that we've been training people, athletic coaches, people who are training athletes. If you're an Equinox trainer, don't come and do this course. No, that was mean, but But if you're training athletic trainer, if you're an athletic trainer or you're a coach, you would come and do this course. It's a 2-day intensive course. We've done over 100 people now, but we say inaugural because now we're launching it to the public. So we've worked on the curriculum for over 3 years. It's got over 1,500 different citations within it. It's absolutely incredible. You learn about the brain. You learn about how the intersection of neuroscience and performance. We go into sleep, nutrition, and exercise as it relates to brain health. Then we do things such as performance metrics. We're doing isotope testing. We're looking at VO2 max. We're doing blood biomarkers. We're doing things like how can you deconstruct Whoop data so you can train your athlete better from the Whoop data. So it's an exciting thing. We might do one here in Texas.
All right, cool. I think you should get with universities for their athletics programs. I think the strength and conditioning coaches would gladly hit you up for sure. All right. Thank you so much for coming on. Let's get in the gym.
Thank you,
I'm excited to
Zachary.
go to the gym.
Me too.
Yeah.
Let's do it.